Hello, welcome. Thanks for stopping by to check out this video. Today we have a bin full of Atari Lynx II parts. Cases, motherboards, screens, just, all these things broken down. And I want to see if I would try and get one working. Just kind of go through these, see what's salvageable, what's not. I've done some of this in the past, which I don't really remember. But this looks like a G, so maybe this board is good. Maybe I've tested it, so maybe we'll start with this one. So this is what I'm going to use to test. All these Lynx were purchased at one point or another off of eBay as non-working, and pretty much the most common issue that these Atari Lynxes have, I believe, more so the 2s than the 1s, or just both, honestly, are that just the circuitry for the power fails and ends up sending the 9 volts input either at the battery or at the power jack here to the chips that, the brains pretty much of the Atari Lynx, and frying them because the Atari Lynx runs on 5 volts. So wherever the power, the 9 volts comes in, is supposed to get reduced down to 5 volts and then power the rest of the system. And then this circuitry, usually in this area with, diode, some transistors, this MOSFET here, something in that chain fails and then ends up sending 9 volts to the chips, frying everything. And actually, now that I look at this thing, it's missing the bottom battery terminal, but I assume we'll have one we can take from. But so with that being said, there's a couple things I like to just do right off the bat. Is just need a screen, so we're going to plug in the screen. This capacitor right here, if you inject 5 volts to this capacitor C41, it should turn the machine on instantly. And if you get some kind of image on the screen, you're good, or at least you know that the internals, the chips and everything, should be working properly, and that most likely your power circuit has failed. So we're going to do that. So I like to just use one of these little barrel plugs to some wires that I will solder onto the back of this capacitor, and then I'll use my bench power supply, outputting 5 volts to this, and see what happens. If you don't have stuff like this and you wanted to try this, just an old USB cable, you can cut one end of it, and typically the red and the black wires are both ground for black, and the 5 volts for the red cable. That's pretty standard, but you may want to double check. But you could solder those to the respective power and ground legs of the capacitor, and then plug it into a 5 volt source. So either like an old phone charger, even your computer might be able to push out enough to turn this on. So you could try it that way. But all right, so we just got to figure out which one is where. So looks like the inside. So the way I'm going to look at it this way, this top leg right here is going to be our ground, and the bottom is going to be power. So I already have these pre-tinned. So let's solder these up. Alright, gonna plug in there. Okay, well, the screen's busted. But you see an insert game logo. So that's actually a good sign. So we're actually going to insert a game and see what happens. And the screen, not too worried about. We're just testing right now. All right. So put in a game. Let's see if it starts. Okay. So it does start. All right. So we verified that the chips and everything that make the Atari run and read the games, play the games, all that fun stuff, appear to be working, because if we inject the 5 volts directly into this capacitor, which bypasses the power circuitry, we do get a game. You know, the Ninja Gaiden game showed up and everything looks fine. So we are going to change out all the power circuitry components and see if we can get this thing back up and running. So I'm just going to remove what we've done. All right. And conveniently enough, if you go to Console 5, you can purchase a Atari Lynx 1 and 2 voltage regular tune-up kit. I got the 5-pack. I purchased this. This is not sponsored by Console 5 in any way. But basically, this comes with all the parts you'll need. It comes with 2 sets of the Zener diodes, the through-hole version or an SMD version. The through-hole, I believe, is for the Atari Lynx 1 version, but you can also use it on this board, and many people do because sometimes it's easier. We'll see which route we have to go. Then it comes with a resistor, the MOSFET, a new power jack input here. Apparently there's like an internal switch in these that fail. I'm not too sure on that, a little fuzzy on that, but it comes with it, so we'll probably replace it. And then it comes with, I don't know, they're probably, I think they're behind here, but it also comes with 2 transistors that need to get failed. Now, the resistor is not needed always. It's just, I guess, some Atari Lynx models are a little picky on the power they need to run. So if you replace everything minus the resistor and it doesn't turn on, swap out the resistor and see if you get better luck. And that's exactly how we'll go. Okay, so got the board set up, put it in a board holder. Hopefully it'll make life a little bit easier, but we can adjust it. It's easier to move. It won't kind of move on the board if you're trying to solder something. And now we're going to have to prep and remove some components. But before we do that, let's show you the components that need to get removed. So, find something to point with. Alright. So what we'll need to get removed and replaced will be this Zener diode, these 2 transistors, and this MOSFET. And then additionally, potentially, this resistor. So that's R74, D13, Q12, and what's that? Q7 and Q8. And you can also look on the Console 5 website, because they will say, install instructions and where the pieces are located. So if you're doing this on an Atari Lynx 1, you can just look at their website and see where the corresponding components are. Everything should be labeled on the board, so it should be pretty straightforward. But alright, we are going to prep by removing as much of the components as we can with our soldering iron. And then this big guy, because it has a huge ground plane on the bottom, is going to take a lot of heat, so that may have to be removed with hot air. But let's see. So, got my soldering iron. So for the sake of this video, we sped up this next part, and I'm just going to talk over it. But we're just applying flux, fresh solder to the joints to help everything, get removed easier. Just applying fresh solder helps with the heat transfer and everything like that. You'll look at that Zener diode, and you'll notice that there's a little brown mark on there. It's dirt from the soldering iron because originally I didn't apply fresh solder, and it just was hard to remove. But you'll see that applying the fresh solder makes things easier. Especially in the case of the transistors. As you'll see, they're small enough where just applying heat to them pops them right off. And then I'm going to actually use my hot air station for the MOSFET because it's just that ground plane, which also acts as a thermal pad, absorbs a lot of heat. So it'll just take a little bit more heat to remove, and it's quicker using a hot air station. And fortunately I have one at my disposal, so I'm going to use it. But basically, once it comes up to temperature, you'll just hover the hot air over it, use some tweezers to pull it off, and it should come up pretty easily. And now with everything removed, we're just going to take some solder braid, and we're going to clean up all these pads. When you're using the braid to wick up the solder, you want to be gentle with it. You don't want to pull or yank on the braid. You want to lift it with the iron still attached to it. Otherwise, it could stick to a pad and rip it. You don't want to apply too much force. You don't want to apply too much heat. But yeah, you're just going to clean up the area. And then once the area is cleaned up, we will apply some fresh solder and then solder on those new components. Make sure you clean as you go. It'll make your life a little bit easier. Just, Q-tip, some rubbing alcohol, not rubbing alcohol, but 99% isopropyl alcohol. But as you see here, we'll just put some fresh flux on there and just add some fresh solder to these pads so we can get ready for it to put the new components on there. Okay, so now we're getting ready to apply the components we got from console 5. You definitely want to be careful, especially with those little components like the transistors, or even the diodes. Just little components like that. They're tough to work with. You definitely need tweezers, but if they slip away from you, those things are gone forever. They're in an alternate universe, and you'll never see them again. But yeah, you just gotta add some flux and then get the component in place, and then the hot air will do the rest. We're just going to go and hot air all these components back into place, and then when we're done, we will touch it up with the soldering iron just so that make sure everything has good joints. And when you're placing this diode, you want to make sure that little black stripe there is facing the right, towards that resistor, because it will not work otherwise. And you see that I accidentally hit that transistor out of alignment when there was hot air on the diode, but we'll fix that in a second. Now, you don't need a hot air station to do this. I just find it easier personally, but you can do all this with just a soldering iron. It's the same process. You just put the component on its pads and then solder them in place, and just make sure everything has a good connection. And now we're almost done. We're just going to clean up again with some isopropyl alcohol and toothbrush, Q-tip, whatever you got. But we're just gonna clean up the area, get some of that flux off of it, and then continue. The last thing we actually have to do is replace this power port. So let's do that. We're just gonna flip the board over, and it's these 3 pins and let's turn everything on. Alright, so honestly the easiest way with this would be just grab your solder and iron. Again, we'll apply some fresh solder. And then I'm just going to hold this on all 3 pins and it should just fall out. We could just give it a hand too, but I don't know if you see it's already kind of moving. I mean, this board holder makes life so much easier. There you go. So just heat up the pads all at once if your soldering tip is large enough to do so. And then, boom, pull it right out. Otherwise, you could use some soldering braid or one of those little hand pump solder suckers or a desoldering gun. It'll all make pretty short work of this jack. And then now we'll go in with some soldering braid, clean up these points. And if you have trouble clearing the holes, what you can do is I will just get a cleaner piece of the desoldering braid here. See if that helps. And that does. Or sometimes if you just flow some fresh solder into it again and try again, it usually comes out a lot easier as well. But alright. Got that clean. Let's clean that up quick. Let's grab a new one that comes with the kit. And let's just install it here. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is we're just going to let gravity hold it for a second. I'm going to apply some solder to the end of my soldering tip. And then with one finger, I'm going to hold this jack in place. And I'm just going to tap one of the legs to kind of try and tack it in place. And I don't know how well you saw that, but we just tacked it in place, and now we can add some flux and solder. Now with this one, you're going to want to kind of try and go at it slow, because if they, the pins are close together, where if the heat transfers to the other ones, it'll just fall back out. So we want to try and avoid that. Alright, that middle pad could be better, so let's add a little bit more solder to it. So yeah, Not sure how well that'll show on camera, but that looks pretty good. And one last clean, and then let's test this thing out and see what it does. Okay, so now we have the board together enough to test. Grab the different little membrane one because this one has the buttons. And got a screen on here. And then obviously here's the board. Got a game in it because it will not turn on without a game in it. If you go the traditional way, if you inject the 5 volts, it'll just bypass all that and turn on. But if any other way, it will not turn on without a game. There are some pins on the cart connector you can jump to have it automatically turn on, but we're not going to do that. So let's put the power plug in, and I believe this should be the power button. So so on, off, backlight, option buttons, obviously with D-pad and buttons, but so let's see if it turns on. It does turn on. Can't really see it with the light. Oh, and there we go. We got the game. Got sound. So now we got this working. We replaced the power circuitry that it commonly fails in these Lynxes. Luckily enough, this one didn't fail to the point where it injected 9 volts through the CPU and other main circuitry that runs the actual games and things like that. So that's good. So we were able to fix this up. The next step's going to be to recap everything and then put it all back in its shell and housing and find a better screen for it. That'll probably be part 2 and maybe 3 of this little series on this Atari Lynx, and hopefully we'll do a couple more. If you like this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, comment below with any comments, questions you may have. But yeah, please stay tuned, and we'll see you in part 2 where we recap this. But thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you in the next one.